Game development is a pretty daunting task. It requires extensive labor and creative prowess over a long period of time. With a number of people in development teams ranging in the hundreds, it's understandable that there are many moving parts to a game. If one breaks, it could derail the whole project. And sometimes, despite getting everything right on a technical level, things just don't click. Either way, this results in a bad game that most likely critics and gamers wouldn't be willing to spend their time on. There has been no shortage of such games in the medium, and on that note, here are 15 such games that are so bad that you probably didn't even care to finish them. Big Rigs Over-the-Road Racing. 2003's Big Rigs Over-the-Road Racing is regarded as one of the worst games in the history of the medium, with good reason. The Stellar Stone-developed title involves players making their way through the US in an effort to get cargo goods delivered within time. In actuality, however, playing it is an exercise in pain, as you try to wrestle with the game's multitude of bugs and other technical inefficiencies that will make you want to throw your controller in the air. BUBSY 3D. BUBSY 3D was one of the PlayStation's 3D platformers developed by Ben Studio, which at the time was called Editic. The game sees players controlling Bubsy as he tries to clamber up platforms and make his way through to the end of a stage. On top of primitive graphics, the controls are pretty clunky for a 3D platformer. Compared to its contemporaries, BUBSY 3D looks like a fan project rather than a game made by a team of professionals. FLATOUT 3: Chaos and Destruction. This Team 6 developed racing game was released for PC in 2011 and was the subject of heavy criticism by both critics and fans alike. FLATOUT 3: Chaos and Destruction features some awkward controls and bad AI, on top of a pretty mediocre visual presentation. There's also not a lot of content for fans to dive into, and it currently stands at a rating of 23 on Metacritic, making it one of the worst games out there. GODZILLA. Making a game about a giant monster as it smashes a city into a bazillion pieces isn't as easy or as fun as it sounds, and developer Natsume learned it the hard way when it released Godzilla in 2014 for the PS4. There were a lot of rough edges surrounding what was ultimately a pretty mediocre game to begin with. The level designs were flawed, and the game's combat encounters were equally unimaginative and uninteresting. All of this is reflected in the game's Metacritic rating, which stands at a 38, and there's a high likelihood that if you picked this game up, you wouldn't have gone too far before switching it off once and for all. Amy. Amy is a stealth horror survival game that sees players controlling Lana as she escorts a young girl Amy across a zombie-infested city. Most of the gameplay involves hiding behind cover and slowly making your way through to the end while utilizing Amy and Lana's abilities. But the frustrating level designs and technical inefficiencies make the whole ordeal a lot more punishing than fun. Aliens: Colonial Marines. Aliens: Colonial Marines was perhaps the biggest disappointment of 2013. Developed by Gearbox Software, Aliens: Colonial Marines sees players taking the role of, well, Colonial Marines as they fight the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. The co-op shooter's development was heavily outsourced, while the team at Gearbox continued to work on projects like Duke Nukem Forever and Borderlands. As a result, the game came out barely functional, with disastrous AI and horrible controls. Aliens: Colonial Marines was planned as a proper AAA project, although its elements did not coalesce together in any meaningful fashion. WWE 2K20. WWE might not be the juggernaut that it used to be at the turn of the century, but the 2K games have provided decent enjoyment for fans of the sport for some time now. That said, the franchise was already spiraling downhill, and WWE 2K20 is perhaps the lowest the series has stooped to date. WWE 2K20 is barely functional, with loads of graphical and gameplay glitches coming on top of what is already a sloppy gameplay experience. The franchise has taken a year gap, with WWE 2K21 being cancelled, and not a lot of fans seemed excited with WWE 2K22 either. Metal Gear Survive. Legendary video game developer Hideo Kojima is best known for his work on the Metal Gear Solid series, but the franchise came to an abrupt end when the developer left Konami amidst the development of Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Keen to capitalize on the market credibility of the Metal Gear IP, Konami released Metal Gear Survive in 2018. The game's survival concepts were underwhelming, and it didn't suit the framework of MGS5 that the game was built upon, making it a failure on a fundamental level. Vroom in the Night Sky. This Switch exclusive sees players taking the role of a fairy as she rooms across the night sky on a flying scooter. Developer Poisoft rushed the game to make it in time for the launch of the Switch, and that made the game an ill-functioning mess. The controls were bad, the game's graphics were bad, and the game wasn't even interesting to begin with. Whatever you do, just don't get this on your Switch. Alone in the Dark Illumination. Alone in the Dark is home to some great survival horror games, and other not-so-great games of the genre. As you can imagine, Alone in the Dark Illumination largely falls in the latter category. The game involves taking part in co-op missions as they defeat hordes of monsters. The game was pretty unpolished, and fans and critics universally panned it with negative reviews. The reception was so bad, in fact, that Alone in the Dark Illumination spelled the end of what was once a promising franchise. Sonic 2006. Sonic had proven to be a great competitor to Mario with its 2D adventures, but the sentiment didn't translate over to its 3D outings, at least initially. Sonic 2006 was a reboot of the franchise, and fans naturally had a lot of expectations from the game. However, all of it went unmet when the game was released in 2006. The game was technically unpolished, had finicky controls, and bad level design, making playing the game a grueling exercise in pain which very few people were able to complete. Ride to Hell Retribution. This Deep Silver published 2013 title sees players controlling Jake Conway as he speeds through the game's linear levels on his bike. Ride to Hell Retribution features generic combat sequences, along with players being tasked to shoot down enemies in a number of different set pieces. The game underwent development hell and came out the other side broken. There were a lot of bugs and glitches to the whole experience, on top of distasteful writing and a simplistic gameplay loop. Afro Samurai 2 Revenge of KUMA. The original Afro Samurai was a decent game, and understandably enough, developer Redacted Studios wished to capitalize on its promising franchise with a sequel. Afro Samurai 2 Revenge of KUMA was released in 2014 for the PS4, and instantly became the subject of mass criticism for almost everything the game did. Controls, visuals, technical competency, voice acting, you name it. Afro Samurai 2 was planned to have 3 volumes, although the reception of the first volume resulted in the developer discontinuing the series and even pulling the game away from stores. Driver 3. Reflections Interactive's Driver series was one of the PlayStation's most ambitious game franchises, as it rendered full 3D open worlds on the puny console, albeit with a lot of sacrifices. The third entry in the series, Driver 3, released in June 2004, and quickly went on to become the biggest disappointment of the year. Publisher Atari had forced the development team to make it in time, before the release of its competitor, GTA San Andreas, which came out in the same year. As a result, Driver 3 was barely functional, and you couldn't do anything without some crazy bug or glitch happening to you. Rogue Warrior. Zombie Studios' 2009 first-person shooter Rogue Warrior sees players taking control of U.S. Navy SEAL Richard Marcinko, who is sent on a mission in North Korea to destroy ballistic missile launchers. However, due to a litany of both technical and design problems, not many players actually reached the game's conclusion before giving up in agony. Rogue Warrior currently stands at a 29 rating on Metacritic, easily making it one of, if not the worst game under publisher Bethesda's portfolio. Fast and Furious Showdown.
Now, floor it. Come on, baby. Let's get this brick to the drop.
The Fast and Furious brand of action-packed racing is certainly ripe for a video game adaptation, and Firebrand Games thought of this when it undertook the development of Fast and Furious Showdown. The game was released on the PS3 and Xbox 360 in 2013. The game's levels are presented as flashback sequences, although the levels themselves are rarely any fun to play. While there is some fanfare for lovers of the movies, Fast and Furious Showdown was a pretty underwhelming release for most who had the dishonor of playing the game. That's all for now. If you enjoy what you saw, please hit the like button. And if you're new to the channel, now is a great time to subscribe. We upload brand new videos every single day. After subscribing, don't forget to enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon. Thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you next time, right here on GamingBolt.